Hello, everyone. This is Naishad Gadani from Your Career Down Under and coming to you live. Again, I'm still in India until at least until 14th April, and then we will decide what happens next. So, for those people who are watching this LinkedIn live, first time or many times, that you've watched us. Me and Caroline Brown have collaborated on doing this LinkedIn Live, which we have named as Career Care Package, since we believe that these unprecedented times requires us to do a lot of care about our career, and we have committed to deliver a care package uh, in terms of delivering a LinkedIn Live show to you guys every weekday, 3 p.m. Melbourne time. And this is the second one for this week. This is probably be the 12th one in this season of this delivering career care package to you. So Caroline, welcome. How is Gippsland today morning?
It's not too bad. It's a bit chilly today. So it's about 15 degrees, a little bit of a wind, a lot of flies. And yeah, but it's still a wonderful place to be in the world in this time. So yeah, thanks again for having me on the show, Naish. That's fantastic. So I'll introduce James. James, we've got James Evangelitis here today. Now, James is a very dear, I won't say old friend of mine, but a very dear friend of mine. Known him for many years, since our early days in recruitment. And one of the reasons we wanted to have a chat with James is that for many years, James has had what I call a portfolio career. So he's been consulting, using LinkedIn and other means, but a lot of LinkedIn to find opportunities for himself. So we really wanted to, I guess, present James to you as an audience to give you some insights on how to do that. Because I know that one of the biggest questions people have is, I'm on LinkedIn, now what? How do I network? A lot of people really don't like the word network. And then how do I create jobs for myself? So, and James is a guru. I'd have to absolutely describe you as a guru in that area, James. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so I guess a good place to start, JE, would be give people a little bit of a background about yourself and what you actually do, because sometimes I can't keep up with you, to be perfectly honest. So.
Well, thank you very much, KB and Naish, for the invitation to come on to this show that's streaming live to more than 1 million people. So thank you.
Well,
anyway,
a couple of zeros off that.
My name is James Evangelitis, and my surname sounds like a disease. I actually went into the local pharmacy that I use to pick up a prescription that I have on file there. And I went up to the counter, and the lady said, "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" I said, "Oh, I'm here to pick up a prescription for Evangelitis." And she looked at me, looked at her assistant, looked at me again, and said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, sir. I don't think we have anything for Evangelitis." I said, "Young lady, it isn't a disease. It's my name. I've never seen. It's absolutely true. I've never seen someone turn beetroot red quite so quickly." And she,
should have the symptoms, JE.
Sorry?
Maybe you should have made up some really gory symptoms and said, "Okay, I want my Evangelitis drug now."
Yeah. So a little bit about myself. I live in Sydney. I'm incredibly old. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry for the state of my head. This is the first time that I actually have done a DIY haircut. And it shows, but the difference between a good haircut and a bad haircut is about 2 weeks. So hopefully it'll be okay. But sorry about this. As my friends say, I've got a great face for radio. So there you go. Now, James, I'm married to Kathy. I have 2 grown boys, Luke and Matthew, 26 and 22. I live in Sydney. My background is, my undergraduate work is in economics, and my postgrad work is in management and education. I've been self-employed for 22 years, and I have made almost every mistake known to mankind. I basically have made the right decision 51% of the time, and made the wrong decision 49% of the time. So that's my background. My fundamental backbone is consulting, so external consultants. I started off as a specialist headhunter in retained search and moved into consulting in the areas of strategy and entry into new markets in professional services. So when I say professional services, think accounting, law, wealth management, and software. So that's my shtick, strategy and entry into new markets. But my real core is understanding what clients really want. So someone told me this many years ago. If you want to really help your clients, you share with them insights of your client's client, essentially their market. So that's what I do. And yeah, thanks again for the opportunity just to share a little bit. It's great.
Yeah, great. So you have a number of things. Often when I talk to you, you have a number of things on the go at one time in terms of the way that you work with clients. How do you set those up? Like, where do they come from?
Essentially, the bulk of my life, people ask me what I do, and my sort of pat response is, I don't know today, but tomorrow, if you come and speak to me, I'll give you the right answer. Because the thing about it is, basically, my core is to understand something and share that understanding with someone else, be they a client and so on. But in terms of opportunities, the most that I've ever had on my plate at once was basically 6 different things that I was doing. 6 different, not businesses per se, but 6 different offerings. But given the market at that time, and this was around the GFC, I knew that 2 would work, but I didn't know which 2. So I maintained all 6, and then it fell back and so on. Now, the question was, how do I find those things out? The only 2 ways to find things out is basically online and offline. And what I mean by online, apparently the 2 biggest uses of the internet are watching porn and cat videos. Now, I don't know how valuable porn is or watching cat videos, but I like actually finding out things that I don't know. According to recent surveys, 93% of people who use a search engine, Google, 93% never go beyond page 1 of a search. 98% never go beyond page 1 and page 2. I have found real gold when I'm doing desk research and so on a search on page 17. So the way that I find these things out is that I get information, and from that I determine whether or not there's an opportunity. And I get it right 51% of the time. I get it wrong. I've wasted lots of time, lots of money, but then again, it's not a waste, because the more things that fail, essentially you start to build up this body of work of things that don't function the right way or work the right way, which basically makes your antennae or your radar sharper. So I've made really good money, I've lost really good money, I've made really good money, I've lost really good money, and it seems to be a cycle. But like I say, so long as you are doing things are successful a little bit more than what, the things that fail, you're okay.
Maybe just if you can give people a little bit more context about an opportunity, JE. So something that you've done a bit of research or gotten to page 28 of Google and found something out about somebody and what that's been and how that's developed. That might help people understand, how they could apply that to themselves in their own circumstances.
Sure. I will give you a very simple example and a complex example. The simple example was that there's a paper in Australia, global audience. There's a paper in Australia called the Australian Financial Review, okay? And it's basically the Australian equivalent of the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times in the UK. So I usually, I try to read that most days. And being Greek, I just don't want to spend any money. So I usually go to the library to read the paper version because the online subscription is quite expensive. Like if you bought the paper, it's like $5 a day, and I read it for 10, 20, 30 minutes. But the beauty of that is because the journalism is actually good, and that's why it's worthwhile. It's worth investing the time. So an example, in 2016, because my specialty is professional services, every Wednesday there is a section in the Australian Financial Review called the professions. And it usually talks about accounting, law, engineering, management consulting, and so on. And I read this article of a professor at Macquarie University who was head of the School of Accounting and Corporate sort of Governance. And he was essentially saying, well, Macquarie University has the largest accounting program, undergraduate accounting program in Australia. So he did a survey of employers both from government and the private sector, and the private sector was switched into two: the professions working for accounting firms and also commerce. Say, for example, an accountant can work with an accounting firm, or an accountant can work with a private firm like a bank, insurance company, or an accountant can work with government. So he basically surveyed them and spent quite a bit of time doing it. He had face-to-face meetings, did a lot of background research, and published the results to share within the university. And then he basically was interviewed by the Fin Review. And essentially, just to keep it really simple, everyone that he met, and he probably met with 100 industry leaders. So it was substantial work. And without doubt, they said, look, technically, okay, your graduates are fantastic. They really know their stuff. They understand the accounting standards. They understand the technicality of what it means to be a good accountant, but they're not well-rounded. And the professor thought, well-rounded, what do you mean? He said, well, from our point of view, well-roundedness means that they have enough self-awareness to know what they're good at and what they're not good at. If they're good at something, then they need to reinforce that. But if they're not good at something, then they need to step up. And not to oversimplify, but the big gap in their well-roundedness were soft skills. Mm-hmm. Soft skills. The ability to ask a good question, the ability to listen, the ability to be proactive, the ability to be a person of your word. If you say you're going to do something, then do it. If you can't do it, you give reasons why. Just really basic things. And I read this article and thought, I should know this guy because I know this stuff. So I used the internet after I watched some cat videos, and that's a joke. I didn't watch the porn one, the cat videos, and found out about this professor, found out all about him, and found out his email address. So the article came out on a Wednesday. So this is 4 years ago. And I emailed him, usually because this particular article got a lot of, it's quite revolutionary to teach accountants how to be, normal people and with soft skills. So I thought, he's going to be inundated with questions. So I'm going to phone him a week later. Well, contact him a week later. So a week later, I sent him an email and explained who I was and so on. And the very next day, I said in the email, if you're available, I'd love to speak with you. To cut a long story short, sent the email. He actually replied to me and said, look, James, I'm actually overseas at the moment, but I'm back next week. Let's talk then. So that's fine. And we spoke and we set up a time to meet. And I explained to him what I do, asked him lots of questions, and cut a really long story short, he said, James, this is really interesting. What do you think is there any way that you can help? So I said, well, yes. So I've got this view that because I'm prepared to back myself, any piece of work that I do for a client, whatever the size, depending upon the type of work, so long as it's not something that's going to burn up a lot of my time or a lot of energy or lots of risk and so on, if it's something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that I can box up and I know that I have the expertise to provide, I do it free of charge. I'm like a drug dealer. The first one's always free, but the next one you pay for. So that's a little bit of an analogy. So essentially what he said was, because he found out about my status on LinkedIn, and he said, well, LinkedIn's something that we don't understand. Do you think you can help us understand? I said, sure. So cut a long story short, I did a presentation, like a guest lecture, to a third-year undergraduate group called Accounting in the Professions, and it has about 300 students, 400 students at that level. And I basically said, yeah, absolutely, more than happy to do that. And he said, well, I've got 2 slots in the upcoming semester. Is there anything else that you know about? And I said, well, I have a particular interest in blockchain technology. And he said, what, blockchain? Gee whiz, how do you know? Anyway, cut a long story short, I only knew this much about it, but I wanted the opportunity to know more. So cut a very long story short, I taught, I had 2 presentations in that semester, which I didn't charge for. One was on understanding the importance of LinkedIn in terms of not just career, but personal brand and influence and authenticity and so on. And the second one was the likely impacts on the global accounting profession of blockchain technologies. So I gave the lecture, and there was like in week 3, and week 3 I gave the lecture on LinkedIn, and week 5 I gave the lecture on blockchain. And not that I'm fantastic at what I do, but I like to communicate really simply and engaging. And the professor was impressed. He said, would it be okay? Could you do this because we teach this course every semester. Would you mind doing it every time we do it? And I said, yeah, sure. But unfortunately for you, I'm going to have to charge a fee. So I now get paid for it, and I've been doing that for 4 years. So I do it only 4 times a year. But what it has done for me is that it's given me an entree into the university to allow me to expand my footprint there in time. But yeah, I'll get paid for it. But one thing that I like to do, which is a tip for everyone who's tuned in, and it's often the simple things that people remember the most. I got to the lecture theatre probably about 10 minutes before it started, and there were probably 50 people there, and people, straggling in. So what I did was I actually introduced myself to 15 people, introduced myself, I'm James, and I asked them their name. And I don't know how quite to explain this. People think, how do you do this? But I actually memorized their names. Now, during the lecture, I would say, so Bill, what do you think about this?
Bill's like, off his phone.
I think, yeah, I think you're right, sir. I think that's right. I said, okay, that's good. And everyone's thinking, oh, he obviously knows Bill. And 2 minutes later, I look at the other side of the theatre up. Joanne, did you agree with what I just said, or do you think that there's a better example? And Joanne goes, no, I think that makes sense. It's so funny. So I do it 3 times. I get the third name, and then everyone leans in. They think that I've memorized every name, and it just engages them. Okay. Now people think that it's really, really hard. And so, no, it's not hard. It needs a bit of practice. But I did one pre-corona because my next one is actually tonight. But it's online. So we've prepped it and recorded and so on. But I have a Q&A afterwards. So I speak for about 30 minutes, and then we have a Q&A for sort of 15. And people ask me various things and so forth about LinkedIn, about blockchain. But the last one that I did was on LinkedIn. And one of the students, and there was not a huge crowd there because Corona was just starting, but it was really interesting. They usually ask me about the contents of what I talk about, but this was one of the few times that they asked me something about myself, which I thought it was sweet and endearing and so on, but quite unexpected. And they said, James, how do you memorize names? How did you? Because I don't just do 3. I probably do during the lecture. I probably do 20 because I asked the same person twice or whatever, but they think that I've memorized everything. But anyway, and I said to him, Bob, Bob. Bob, it just takes a bit of practice, but what's the most important word in the English language if you speak English? Or Urdu? Urdu? Do you speak Urdu, Nash? Nash? Do you speak Urdu?
No, I speak Hindi.
Hindi. I'm sorry. It was one or the other. Anyway, if they speak English, what is the most important word in the English language for that person? And it's their name. It's their name. So I think it's very important to take the time to show respect and that little bit of effort to remember someone's name. Because people say, oh, I'm at a party or a function and they say their name, it goes in one ear and out the other. Well, you don't have to let it. I mean, it's so good and it's so obvious when people don't know your name. They go, oh, mate, really good to see you, mate. Fantastic, mate. And so, and that's just not. But when you remember someone's name, you show them that respect for their person, you know. So it's cool. Now that's a very long-winded example, but now I get paid, and I'm doing some more study, and they come to me for advice. I've even done a podcast series for them, which I didn't charge for because I didn't know how to charge for it. I thought it was fun, and it was in soft skills. And one of the topics was, which I thought was funny, because they asked me I gave them 12 topics and they had to choose the top 5. So we got set up time in the studio. One of the most popular ones was how to leave a voicemail.
Wow. Okay.
Because young people get really nervous and so on. People that I don't know, especially young people, leave me a voicemail and say, oh, James, it's Stuart. You don't know me, but can you phone me back on 04? And they say their phone number so quickly, the only numbers that I can hear are 04. And I say, congratulations. You've now refined it to every mobile phone number in Australia. Thank you.
James, can I just take it back to, like, with you, because obviously you've had this huge range of things that you've done for, did you say it was Macquarie that you? Yeah. So why? So you found the article in the AFR, you found the right person to speak to, you did some background on them, you had a meeting with him, which was a kind of get to know you meeting, or I'd love to do some work with you type meeting. Was that sort of, and then he said, what can you do? And you went back and said, you've got this background in training on LinkedIn and so forth. And then that's how that sort of played out. Is that right?
That's right. But in those meetings, although I can talk under wet cement, and that reminds me of a funny story. Anyway, that's another time. It's very important when you have those meetings, especially with people that it's the first meeting, that you actually ask questions and you really listen to the response. Now, I knew the answer to the question, what can you do for us, before we asked it, because I asked questions about his need. And there were like probably 4 areas that he identified. I couldn't help with all 4, but there are 2 areas that I could. And I just listened. Like as someone said to me, if you want a better answer, you ask a better question. That's all.
What's an example of a great question that you ask that really gets you to, because I reckon a lot of it is about, you're absolutely right, like just from my perspective, is really listening, but it's also getting the information that you need to really understand where they're coming from. So what's a great question that you ask that gets people talking?
It depends upon the context, but a very simple one is, why is this important to you?
Yeah.
Why is this program or this service line or this new branding project important to you? If people haven't read it or seen his TED Talks, there's a very famous book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and I highly recommend that. It's one of those books that you don't read once. You read once and then you refer back to it, because he's absolutely right. The why is when you actually get to the heart of the real need.
So why is that important to you? As in, what meaning does it have to the organisation or to you personally, or just why? Is that,
yes, but also people sometimes, they could be graduates, they could be older people like me, anyone, feel that sometimes in in their professional work that they have to use complex language to impress people with their vocabulary and so on. I've found quite the opposite. People who use jargon sometimes use it from a place of insecurity because they don't know their subject matter well enough not to use jargon. Like, say, for example, a Nobel Prize winning economist can explain the most complex arbitrage implications for the global economy between three currencies because he understands it so well to a plumber. And the plumber can understand what he's talking about, because people who know their subject matter really well speak plainly and without cliche, without exaggeration.
Yeah. So why do you think you kept getting ongoing engagements with Macquarie? What were you planting the seed about those things that you could do, or how did you sort of continue the relationship so they kept offering you different things to do?
The thing is, and it sounds quite trite, my job with any of my clients, be they a head of a professional services firm, a CEO of a manufacturing firm, someone to do with not-for-profit or whatever, usually I deal with people who make the decisions because that's the level that not that I waste time, and so sometimes you can't get that at stage one, you have to sort of press. My job is to make them look good to their boss or their stakeholders. So if I'm dealing with the owner of a company, it's to make them look good to their market. If I'm dealing with a CEO, it's to make them look good to their board. If I'm dealing with the head of a division, it's to make them look good to their boss. Because that's a very simple way of saying that if I'm doing the right job, then I'm really... my offering, the time that I spend with this person or their division, it makes it a richer experience to essentially make them better. I've got this saying that it's only taken me 25 years or thereabouts to come up with it. Now, this is just in a B2B sort of context. So for those people, I don't want to use jargon for the sake of it, but that's when a business sells to another business. So that's B2B. B2G is business to government. B2C is business to consumer, and there's another one called B2I, that's business to institutions, okay? So because I primarily only deal with B2B, I've come up with this little, it's like a rule of thumb, and it doesn't matter if you're providing a product or if you're providing a service. It doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter which country, which language you communicate in. If you boil down business to its actual, to its real essence, okay, unless you as a supplier of services or a supplier of a product to that business in a B2B market, unless you can do, got the camera right, whoop, whoop, whoop. Gee,
Three fingers,
so
yeah.
So working with three screens.
That actually looks like
three,
a
yay, I've got it. Three, okay, three. No, in fact, I'll just do this. Three, unless you can do, whoop. Oh, it's so funny. Anyway, three.
We get it.
Sorry, guys. Thank you. Unless you can do at least, you can't do all three because you'd be a superstar. Unless you can do at least one of these three things in a compelling, genuine, sincere way, you don't have a right to sit at that table of that potential client. And the three things are: one, to help them make more money; two, to help them save more money; or three, to lower time/risk in operating their business. Unless you can do at least one of those, as I say, in a compelling, genuine, sincere way, you are wasting their time and you're wasting yours. Now, I work with a lot of businesses who can't articulate exactly what they can do for the client in those three areas. And the onus is upon them to make their offering, to make their story crystal clear. It's not, the onus is not upon the client to do, well, I think you can help us in this area. No. You have to prove to them that you can add to them. That's all. And I'm amazed when people say, well, but we're the best in the market. Well, that's great, but I don't know you. This is our first meeting. Hey, what can you do for me? That's all. Yeah.
So you're
Absolutely.
answering that question.
If I can
Sorry.
ask a question around, what's important sometimes is that, how do you really approach someone? And, on a LinkedIn or email or phone, I think that's one of the scariest thing. I'm going to put that back in the context of job seekers. People who are looking for job. So someone identified, three things that you said, which me and Caroline also keep saying, that you got to be able to say how you can deliver a value to the employer. Let's say somebody has identified it, right? And then the next thing is the most scariest part, is that how do I've got the phone number of someone, I've got the email of someone, right, that I can reach out. And not many job seekers are really sort of proactive or really tuned to reaching out to those people. What are your methods, some of the thinking that you do to reach out to those decision makers, not with a view that you give me the job or anything, but just to reach out to them, so that can we have a coffee meeting, can we have a call or something? What are your thinking around that? Because that we believe that in these corona times, that really, I think that's one of the most effective strategy, that you are still able to think on your own feet and reach out to those decision makers. What are some of your tips around that?
Nash, that's a really good question. And in this, by the way, just as a side note, during this corona crisis challenge, for want of a better term, in terms of employees, in terms of people who don't have employment, seeking employment, now's not the time to find jobs. Now is the time to sharpen your axe. Now is the time to retool. Now is the time to change your perspective and work on the long term. Do what you can in terms of generating income and so on. But for those people who've been retrenched or stood down and so on, don't do what the pack does. Do something different. Stand out. Now, Nash, there are lots of ways of doing it, but it's this old adage, people buy from people. Okay? Let me share with you a true story, just a brief one. In the United States, the concept of an intern is a big thing. There are these college graduates who want to intern at the White House or intern at IBM and so on, and they're incredibly competitive. Most internships don't pay, but they take care of expenses. But it's an indication that if you get the right internship, it's a stepping stone to something greater. And in the United States, it's incredibly competitive. Anyway, Adidas America, quite a few years ago, very, very big outfit, very successful and so on. They have an internship program each summer. And I don't know how big it is. It might be 10 interns or 20, something like that. But it's a huge organization. And because it's Adidas, tens of thousands of people apply for it. Anyway, there was this college grad, okay, who wanted to stand out. Okay, he wanted to differentiate himself in such a way. Now, most people, they fill in the online form and they upload their CV and so on. So he did that, but he wanted to stand out from the pack. So what he did, which I thought was very clever, he bought an Adidas basketball. Okay, an Adidas basketball. It wouldn't have gone down very well if he bought a non-Adidas, but he bought an Adidas basketball. He pumped it up because they come deflated. And what he did in permanent black ink was write his CV on the ball, as it were, all around it. He put it in this special gift box with a lid and so forth, okay? And he hand-delivered it to the New York headquarters. Now, let's just say that 5,000 people applied for those 20 sort of positions, okay? This is one that they remembered, and it's still spoken about probably 10 years later. Now, he didn't get the internship, but the people at Adidas were so impressed with his creativity, with the fact that he wanted to stand out and so forth, that they actually arranged an internship with one of their suppliers. And he got the internship but the great thing about it was that he made friends at Adidas because of what he did, because it stood out. And people like the fact that it's very quirky, I mean, they show it around, like he's the ball. It shows that he's on the ball and all this sort of stuff. It's very, very, very funny. Now, that's an extreme example. One example that I did for a senior person. Now, this guy, ex-Accenture, he was at the level of a program director. So he's probably on about $300,000 a year. And this happened during the GFC. Oh, sorry, just after the GFC, because everyone, you know, it was just terrible. Isn't it amazing? The GFC is a morning tea break compared to Corona, because Corona's a whole different level. Anyway, this guy, you know, incredibly capable. His last pay there, I think, was $400,000. So he's a senior guy, and he basically got retrenched, and he thought, oh, I'll step into something and so on, like the GFC's happened, so on. 1 month went by, 3 months went by, 6 months went by. And I think it was at month 9, he approached me because he's a friend of a friend, and he was really nervous. He'd lost confidence and so on. He said, oh, James, look, I'm applying for every job, recruited and so on. They say that I'm too expensive. They say that I'm too big, too senior for the role. Sometimes it's code for you're too old. But he said, how do I stand out? Because unfortunately, you know, with the GFC, there were lots of people of his ilk on the market, you know, thousands of people. So he needed to stand out. And I said, his name was Nick, so I called him Nick. And it's a small joke, thank you. So Nick said, look, James, it's 9 months and I'm lost confidence, and, you know, I've got concerns. And he's getting quiet. This is a guy who's never been unemployed before. He was 45, so he'd been working for 20 plus years easily. And his undergraduate work was in engineering, and he has a brain the size of a planet and very, very capable. Anyway, I said to him, Nick, look, now's the time to do things that are different, to be contrarian. Who do you want to work for? So, cut a long story short, he identified 5 companies, specific companies in 2 industries. Let's call them financial services and energy, okay? So, I gave him a strategy on, you know, with the internet and so on, you can do a lot of desk research. So, cut a long story short, he found out as much as he could about the company and about the CEO, specifically CEOs of these sort of companies. Now, people like to be treated like people. Let me ask you, Naish, a question. When was the last time someone sent you a non-work related parcel? Just a parcel, like a box, through the mail or through a courier?
Probably 2-3 years back.
Yeah. So by definition, it's something that doesn't happen every day or every month or every 6 months, okay? And I get quite excited when, you know, because you see this box, you think, oh, fantastic, open it and so on, you get quite excited. So, cut a very long story short, we found out of these 5 CEOs, we found out through LinkedIn, through some 3 hobbies that they were into. One was into rugby, one was into sailing. Unfortunately, and I'm sorry, these were all men, 5 CEOs men. So, Carolyn, on behalf of males everywhere, I just want to say sorry to all of womanhood.
That's all right. Yep.
Yeah. So these were men. So thank you, very gracious. So I remember 3 of them. One was into sailing, one was into rugby, and one was into French provincial cooking, which is quite funny. But the other 2 we couldn't find out anything about. So the strategy was, okay, and we worked on 2 things. One, for Nick to buy a book, basically a hardcover book, because people don't throw out books. If you give them a mug or a pen, the pen goes in the drawer, the mug goes into the cupboard or whatever. Or a stress ball, you want to throw it at the person who gave it to you because it's stressful getting a stress ball. Anyway, but a high quality book, people don't throw out, okay? So anyway, so the idea was to hand deliver, not to the CEO, but to reception. Okay, you find it as much as you about. Okay, so it was a box. The box had shredded paper in it to hide the book, and on top of the shredded paper was an envelope with a handwritten note, just a few lines. Okay, and we put it in the box, and it had a bow on it. Okay, and this was hand delivered to each reception. 3 of them were books linked to their particular interests. The other 2 were more sort of generic, like one was on, you know, things that guys want to know about. You know, it could be cars, could be sport and so on. But each book, like we're looking at a high quality book of between $50 to $100. Okay. Cut a long story short, he got meetings with 2 of those CEOs. So that's a strike rate of 40%. The other 3 either weren't in the country or whatever. But I never forget this aspect of the story. he basically said in the note, look, just say this, just accept this as a gift. You're really busy and so on. I would like a moment of your time. That's all. Just a moment, just 10 minutes of your time face to face. I will contact your office in the next few days to see if you'd be willing. Okay, that's all. So he dropped, and this is all sort of staged. He dropped off the parcels on Monday afternoon and phoned Wednesday morning. Okay, that's quite specific. Okay. Anyway, he got 2 meetings. Never forget this. He was transferred to the executive assistant of the CEO. And when Nick said, "Oh, I'm the chap who you dropped that off. Oh, he loves it. He keeps on going on about that. No one's giving him this." And guess what? She said, "Oh, look, I know you want to speak to him. Why don't we set up a phone call, speak to him, and then let's set up a meeting. The best time to phone is he gets in at 7:15, and he's more than happy to accept phone calls from internal people. But I'll tell him that anyway. That was just pure gold. Set up the meeting. Now those 2 CEOs. Now people think, oh, but what about the other 3? No, that's a 40% strike rate. That's pretty. And it took in terms of research about 2 days. About 2 days. Phone calls, internet, going down to the library. Anyway, he didn't get jobs with those 2 firms. However, one of the CEOs was so impressed with him, he said, we don't have a need now, but I've got because CEOs hang out with other CEOs. There's a mate of mine who runs a firm like ours. It's a bit smaller, but he said to me just last week that he's needing someone in this area, and I think he'd be ideal. Why don't I phone him? And he got the gig.
It's a fantastic story. It really is. So was the
But
research...
I love the EA saying the best time to phone him is this time. Oh, sorry, I spoke over you.
No, I was just going to say, you found out from LinkedIn they had their hobbies listed, or you sort of did further research to see what,
or if it didn't have it, if it didn't, sorry, KB, if they didn't have it, then sometimes if you know someone who knows someone, you phone them up and say, oh, what is that person into? So that's it.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic story. We'll put that one on the list. Give me the gift of your time if I give you a gift.
Whoa.
It's interesting that because we've sent, with my clients and we've sent old-fashioned letters that have worked just because we knew that person would open that letter. Yeah. And, they didn't get the meeting with the CEO, but they got the meeting with the person that they should be speaking to, basically. But the direction came from the CEO. So,
that's gold.
I think there's wonderful stories around that. It's right. I think it's finding the right target. You know what I mean? Like if you hadn't found the right hobby, then you could have missed the mark a little bit or whatever. But even, like you say, the thought of that, as in somebody's personally researched and worked out what you're interested in and found a fantastic book. So, great story. So, and why 3:00 on Wednesday? Did you not 3:00? You said Wednesday morning, didn't you? That they called. Did you say?
No. Yeah. They phoned Wednesday morning. He phoned Wednesday morning. Apart from the, we phoned Wednesday morning, but that EA told him, the best time to phone. Anyway, the reason is that the worst time, not just to seeking appointments, but be it selling or research or whatever, if you're asking the time of people, no one's sitting there looking at the phone waiting for it to ring. By definition, you've interrupted them.
Yeah.
Okay? So here are 2 tips. Never, ever make a phone call for any reason unless it's an emergency or the person on a Monday or a Friday. Ever. That's a rule that I have. It's always Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But in this case, in the case of that example, we wanted to keep it fairly tight in terms of the dropping off the book and the follow-up phone call. No one likes a Monday. They've written songs about it and so on. So that would have brightened up the day in the afternoon, and it's close enough to refer to it. The other thing is, and this is just a general tip, and I'm amazed that people don't think this way. Whenever I make a phone call to someone that I don't know, I always ask them, I say who I am. I'm the chap who sent you the email the day before last. I know you're very busy. Is now a good time to speak for 5 minutes, or is there a better time? And you'd be surprised that people have this, No one actually, like, people just start blurting up, but as I say, by definition, you've interrupted them. You show them the respect by saying, if you got 5 minutes now, great, but if not, that's absolutely fine. And because that's the way that I like to be treated. And I'm amazed that people pick up a phone, like they pick up a phone and, yes, hello, James speaking. Oh, I'm in a meeting now. I mean, why pick up a phone in a meeting? Why not leave your voice? It's just crazy. Anyway, so what I do, I always ask that question, and invariably people like it. Say, oh, look, now's not a good time. Can you phone me tomorrow between 3 and 4? And we said, I said that's absolutely fine. I send them an email saying thank you very much for your time. I'll phone you then, and people appreciate it. And they don't know me from a bar of soap, but they appreciate the fact that I respect their time. And the tone of the phone call always goes better because they have a higher view of me, even though they don't know me.
It's funny because really sometimes in sales they say, don't ask if this is a good time. But
do they make the sale?
Sorry?
Do they make the sale?
I don't know. That's, to get instructed not to ask if it was a good time because it never was. So, but you're saying like, obviously that really works. So that's, fantastic too.
That's really practical, James. And, the time is coming to 45 minutes. We should, wrap up this discussion. Anything else, James? Because I think you touched upon very, very salient points around thinking differently. I like the idea of, because what you did with reading the Australian Financial Review is that you synthesized ideas together, and you thought that there is a way for me to position myself. I'm curious, as KB like to call, is that being curious is a trait that you can develop, because the more curious you about businesses around, the problems that business world is facing, I think there is an opportunity for you to really bring your skill into the picture and think about maybe there is a possibility for you to solve those problems for them or not. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaway from this, this LinkedIn Live is to be open, is to read, is to synthesize ideas, bounce ideas those with other people, right? While you are proactively, actively looking for the work, that is in your, that can lead to for your career. But it is essential for you to develop this kind of curiosity and synthesization of ideas. So, James, thank you very much for spending some time and giving insights. It's a different kind of interviews that we had, but it's a very important piece in the puzzle that we are solving for job seekers out there. So, thank you very much again, and KB. Thank you very much for for bringing James. For the audience, we'll be back again tomorrow with Carol and me are going to talk about resumes or COVID resumes, or how do you really write resumes that stands out in this competitive marketplace. So don't forget to tune in tomorrow 3 p.m. Melbourne time again. Come to my LinkedIn profile and you will see the LinkedIn Live coming through. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, James. Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.